Evening everybody, hi, Martin here, thank you for joining me, I hope you are all well. Right, it's 7 minutes past 7 and you know the score by now. Make yourselves comfy, grab a bite to eat, have a drink, bottle of wine, bottle of beer, something like that, and sit back and hold on until 7:30 when we get started with the demonstration. Yeah, I've got a couple of bits and pieces that I need to do as usual, so please do chat amongst yourselves for a bit, and I'll see you shortly. And I can read the comments, so if any of you are cheeky, I'll see it. Got a couple of bowl gouges I need to, what's the word? Sharpen. I hope you all enjoyed the demonstration on Saturday. If you joined in, this evening certainly won't be as long as that, but we will throw in a little bit of colouring and obviously a little bit of turning before we look at the actual process of, or my process of lacquering. And I hadn't had a chance to do another video in the last week, so you had Digby, but judging by the comments, that's not a problem. Let's get some glasses on. One gouge. Can't see anything through these glasses very well. The internet connection's a little bit wobbly at the moment. It's being looked at, don't worry. Can't see anything through these glasses. Do. Oh, looks like the stream's beginning to steady up a little bit. I'm running a new, well, it's not a new setup. It's just a little bit, slightly different to how it was, and I will show you probably on Saturday the the new setup. Hello, Regina in Colorado. I hope you are all well. I've got an absolutely gorgeous piece of maple on the lathe tonight, which I will show you when we get started. It's all very exciting, this new setup. So there might be a little bit of a glitch with the internet connection, but I do have my internet guy on it. Yes, Adrian, tidy workbench, which makes a change. I've still got the piece from Saturday on its chuck. Peter Opekta from Germany, hi. Chris Sullivan, new cameras? No, I've just slightly reconfigured things. There is a new camera, but it's rubbish. So, but thankfully we don't need it tonight, and I will be actually changing the whole setup to work with video cameras at some point in the future. Lynn Bayford, hi Lynn. Martin, when are you doing the cake? I'm considering something, Steve Ash. I'm considering something. I don't know when it will be, but we shall see. If the internet connection goes a little bit wonky, don't panic. It is being looked at. Marky, over in the States, no, it's the Saturday demonstrations that start really early in the morning for you guys over there. The Tuesday ones always start this time. Martin Miles in Petersfield, hello. Mark, the gentleman Wood Turner, good evening. Good evening, Tubby Turner and Les Taylor, Ivor Longwalk, Thomas Kroll, nice to see you all. I'm looking forward to this one. I'm absolutely exhausted, so I must admit I did have a sneaky 40 winks earlier on. Well, it wasn't really 40 winks, it was more like 20, but I did manage to get a little bit of rest. Forgive me if I keep checking my phone. I need to see if my my internet guy's sending me any messages. Ba, 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 ba. Well, the cameras are looking okay. Boop, 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 boo. Somebody sent me a message earlier. Matt Held, wow, you're a star. Thank you very much. I've not even started yet. Thank you very much. Oh, I ate my dinner too quickly. It's beginning to burn, if you know what I mean. Silk, has Martin got Marmite? Oh, Silk, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, for this cooking and turning demonstration after Emma's, I was kind of challenged to do one, so I might do a cheese and Marmite sandwich or a cheese and Bovril sandwich. Stephen Rickett. Oh, you placed an order with Simon Hope. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm hoping the internet connection is going to steady out. It should do. Just needs to settle. We've got Peter. Thank you very much in Germany. Thank you. It's going very well. Thank you very much. Yeah, the internet connection we have here is incredibly complicated, and thankfully my cousin's husband is a bit of an internet network engineer whiz, so he's tinkering around doing whatever he does. I don't understand. Karen Browning, I don't have to bake the bread for it. I'll sort something out, but any kind of cooking utensil or whatever is a 60-second walk that way or a 55-second run. So it will be very difficult for me to do some kind of cooking demonstration and do something turning wise, but I will see if I can sort something out somehow. Dewey's making a pedestal bowl out of sapele. Oh, that's great, Dewey. So you're doing two You've been inspired by two different demonstrations. That's great. Renee Norman. Hello, Renee. How are you? Hi in Holland, Huig. Nice to see you again. Oh, I thought I don't like original Coke. I only like Diet Coke. Oh, let me turn the lathe on, that'll help. I've got sharp gouge. No, that one's not sharp. I need to sharpen this gouge now. 10 minutes before we're off. Oh, I think that was a buzz from the internet guy. No, it wasn't. Ba, ba, ba. And that one needs a bit of an edge on it as well. Hi Jack, Rob CP, Tony, hi Tony. Right, what was I doing? Breaking everything. Now I did a demonstration on Saturday and I feel, how do I feel? I can't even put words straight. I feel really out of the water tonight. It's very peculiar. I'm sure it'll be okay. connection speeds back up again. Sandiel, is this using your new PC? Yes, it is. It arrived this morning, and I spent the most of the day actually getting it set up and running. So I'm one camera down, one decent camera down. I've got another one up there, but I've just got to wait for a few more bits and pieces to arrive before the new setup is sorted out. Design and make. I'm good, thank you very much. Pretty tired, but I'm good. Steve Ash, I have some of your purple wax. How deep do I need to groove my bowl to accept the wax? Half a millimetre, something like that. Zandiel, are you streaming on a new PC? Yes. Phil, I want to promote bodging for birds. Emma is going to make one, but I feel I should do one on video as well. Oh, Pete, yes, Twisted Trees. I need to do something for you to help you promote your bodging for birds. I think that's... oh, sorry. I said dinner was playing up on me. Yes, so Pete at Twisted Trees, definitely need to help you out with your bodging for birds thing. I think that's a great idea. Rob CP, oh yes, my setup is it has improved. It has improved. It's not quite there yet. It's not quite where I want it just yet. There's a few bits and pieces missing, but I'll show you around it on Saturday. I think because we haven't really got time tonight or Thursday, because Phil, who has been looking after the chat for you for the last few weeks, is doing a charity wood turning quiz in a jointly hosted event on Thursday, which I'll talk about a little bit more as we get going, or as we get sorted. I'm glad you're getting a good picture. It does look like the internet connection has settled down a little bit. It is a new setup, so it might be a little bit wonky. And as I've said before, I can actually see how it's going. So if I see something going wrong, I'll let you know. Buster, the lathe control box on a cable, was that an addition or part of the lathe? It is part of the lathe, Buster. It comes with it, wherever it is, this thing here. This is part of the lathe, and I would imagine those of you who've got a bit of electrical nous will be able to rig something up on your own lathes if you're careful. Donald Carter, thank you very much. Glad you like that. Martin, what do you have on the wall holding your tools? I've got just little pipe clips. There was one kicking around, but I might have been organised and tidied it up. But yeah, they're just those little pipe clips. I might have one down here actually. He said, looking in. Oh, there they are. I'll show you. So who's asking about those? Dara, just those, oh, can't see them very well, just those little clips, plumber's clips I suppose they are, pipe clips, something like that. Don't worry Rob CP, started your own business at the worst time. It can't be easy, it's difficult all round I think. Martin, do you have a motorbike? I've a long walk. I used to have a little Suzuki FS1E DX 50cc job when I was 16, and that that was the last time I was on any kind of motorbike other than riding pillion with somebody on a Harley a few years ago. Thanks for asking, though. Oh, they're called Terry clips, apparently. Dara, if you were asking, they're called Terry clips. Martin, did you ever get your Nova Galaxy lathe sorted? No, it's still over there, and I haven't had a chance to get it sorted yet. I so rarely use it, or want to use it, it's not at the top of my list of priorities. It only needs a little new fuse thing at the back. Oh, yes, Leisure, I did. I sat on the bike. I didn't go for a ride on it. I only sat on it. You're welcome, Dara. Right, okay, I'm just going to finish getting sorted out as usual, so I'm going to stick on the little break video and I'll see you back in a couple of minutes and we'll get going with this gorgeous piece of maple. Don't go away. Right then, we're back. Hello everybody, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I hope you are all well. And if you've been here from the beginning, you probably would have heard a few of these little bits and pieces. But I hope you're all well. Thank you for joining me this evening for part 1 of 3 of a lacquering demonstration. I have a stunning piece of sorry, just opening up the tool rest there. No, not the tool rest, tailstock. I have an absolutely stunning piece of maple on the lathe for you this evening, which we're going to turn into a bowl, and then we're going to colour it. Well, we're going to sand it, colour it, seal it, and then we're going to put on the first few coats of lacquer. And then on Thursday evening we'll put on a couple more coats of lacquer, and also your eminent administrator or your moderator there in the YouTube chat, Phil Bolter, will be hosting a charity quiz on behalf of the Blood Bikes, who are an amazing group of people who do some superb work for the NHS charitably. Phil, I dare say, in fact, Phil, whilst some of this is going on, if you could throw some details into the chat, that would be great. So Phil and I will be doing a Zoom meeting on Thursday. I'll do the bits with the lacquer, and then Phil will take over to host a really fun wood turning quiz for you, with all of the super chats and stuff from Thursday going to the Blood Bikes here in the UK. Couple of points of housekeeping. As usual, I do run these by myself. I've got nobody in my ear talking to me, so if you do have any questions, please hold on to them until I ask for them specifically, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can, so we can all get to bed at a reasonable hour. Last week I think I didn't get home till 11:15. So does anybody have any questions before we get going? There's one there, design and make. What lathe do I use? I use the Axminster Trade AT2030. It's the large, the big Axminster Trade lathe. It has changed its name now, and I'm not sure entirely what it is, but it is their big trade one. Oh. The internet connection looks like it has settled down now. No, Chris Sullivan, it will, sorry, let me clarify that. The demonstration on Thursday will be here on my YouTube channel, but Phil and I will be having a Zoom meeting that will be streamed into the YouTube channel. So don't go looking for it on Zoom. Come back here. I'll be posting all of the links as usual on my social media pages, and if you're on my mailing list, you'll also receive all the details. Right, okay. As I said earlier, I am using a slightly new setup this evening that I've spent most of the day sorting out. So I am down an overhead camera. I do have one up there, but it's really not very good. It was a complete waste of money, so I'll be sending it back. So that's the only overhead camera we've got for tonight, but we do have the two normal fantastic ones. Right, I'm going to tuck my hoodie toggles, or my hoodie cords, inside, because you don't want to be turning with those hanging out. David Hall, yeah, the blank size, good idea. Find the tape measure. No, ruler will do. It's not 12 inches. The blank tonight is 11 inches by 2 3/4. So that in English, that's 275 by about 68. Ivor Longwell, do you know anything about the wax used on end grain? Can it be purchased, and would candle wax do? Yes, Ivor, candle wax will be absolutely fine, but it might be cheaper to find some big blocks of paraffin wax from somewhere. Paraffin wax is cheaper and just as good. Right, okay, shall we get going? Because I don't want to, as much as I love you all, I don't want to be here till 11 o'clock. Okay, right, so the blank tonight is, well, call it 11 by 3, something like that. Sorry you haven't got a good view of that just at the moment, but I will put the other camera on just so you've got a vague idea. So make sure you've got some PPE on. Face shield, or an absolute barest minimum will be glasses. The blank tonight is mounted onto a chuck mounted faceplate. using six screws. And for those of you who are partaking in the weekly drinking game, make sure that your tool rest is at a height that when the tool is presented to the work, you're cutting on or just about below the center line. And I'm going to start this with a 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and actually I'm just looking at this, there is some checking in here. Let me switch over the camera. You might be able to see I've got a little bit of checking there. It's not too deep, so I'm going to take this nice and easy. And although I normally use just glasses when demonstrating, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to switch over to my face shield. And we're going to take this nice and steady until we can turn that away. So lathes on, give the piece a spin just to make sure it's not catching on the tool rest as it goes. The tailstock has been brought up for a little bit of support. Start the lathe nice and slow and just bring it up. Bring the speed up and then present the tool to the work. This is a very hard piece of maple. Cool. It is very hard. Hope you're all getting a good look at my receding hairline back there. Speed the lathe up a little bit. That's better. Yeah, we've got some gorgeous figure in there. You can't see it from the top. Yes, and there's even a little bit of burr in there as well. Ooh, ooh, lovely, lovely. And just having a look, I can see, you won't be able to see it unfortunately, but I can see where we've got these little check marks. They don't go in too far, and they will be turned away when we do the shape of the bowl. I'll just smooth that off just a little bit. Don't need to do this bit, I'm just doing it just so it looks quite neat. That little bit of knocking just there was quite a hard bit. It's that bit there. That bit there is really hard. Okay, now I can lose the tailstock and show you the other camera. That's better. That's a much better picture, isn't it? Okay, charge your glasses, make sure that the tool rest is at the right height, so the tool is cutting right on the centre line, and as you can see I've got the handle a long way down, and when I present the wing to the work it's cutting right along the centre line there. I'm going to take a few easy cuts just to get started, but remembering I have the those little check marks in here. Stop there. Yeah, there's one there and there's one there, but they will be turned away, as I said, when the shape's done. One more. The lathe, if you're interested, is currently at 632 RPM, and this is very, very hard maple. That's killed the edge of that gouge straight away. Okay, now we can put a tenon on the bottom. There is some absolutely gorgeous figure in here. This is going to look superb when it's coloured. It really is. Oof, oof, suits you, sir. Okay, going to use Chris Fisher's speed sizer again because it's so handy. And this will be going onto a set of Axminster sea jaws. Just wind the tailstock in there, find the centre. There's the sea jaw mark. I think that's making a mark. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Sure, that's right. Let me just double check myself. Just want to just make sure that I am right and that I'm not going mad. Yes, that's right. Okay, goody good. Right, start to turn the tenon. I'm going to switch to a 3/8 gouge now. Face shield down. Just the same as usual. It's amazing the difference a nice sharp gouge makes. Just need to get the tool rest up just a little bit. Speed the lathe up a tiny bit as well. So that's just moved the lathe up to 750 RPM. I can hear those check marks flapping round, so I'm being very careful of those. And you can see here where all the figure is, because it's cutting out, it's tearing out really badly. So we're going to have to take a very nice cut later on to get rid of as much of that as possible. But wood with figure like this does it does tear out quite badly because the grain's running in all sorts of different directions. So I'm using a round skew here, and then I'm just going to put a square tenon on here as well, because that's what the sea jaws require. So the tenon itself is a little bit deeper than I would normally use, and I'm making sure that the corner between the actual tenon down there is nice and clean, so when the bowl's reverse mounted, it's got there's no rubbish in there, there's no tear out or anything like that, so that's good. Now, as per usual, you know me, I like to have a foot that is a third of the diameter of the bowl, and to do that I normally have the lathe spinning, because it gives me, it essentially looks completely plain, and if it looks completely plain, then I can't be tempted to save something. I can't be tempted to save a knot. If I move the foot in a little bit, you know, to save a knot or whatever, I'm much more interested in the form at this point rather than the figure. Right, okay, let's have a look. And I think, actually, roughly there, where I finished cutting, so perhaps a little bit wider. About there should do, I think. Somewhere around there anyway. That looks good. Okay, now we can start shaping the bowl. So I'm going to put the tool rest perpendicular to, well, 90 degrees to the 45 degrees to the corner, and just start to eat that corner away. I'm going to do this fairly quickly because I want this demonstration to be more about the finishing than the actual turning. And the figure in here is really flaky. It's not turning at all nicely. It's coming off in chunks rather than streamers. You can see here how it's tearing out, which isn't very nice, but it is what it is. Okay, just come in here to start working on the foot. I'm going to make the foot a little bit deeper than I do normally because I need to turn this off some other time, which we will probably do on Saturday. Gosh, look at that figure. Oh, we're going to have fun colouring this. Now I'm still being careful because we've got those little check marks that I need to turn through. And every time if you look in the top left-hand corner of your screen, you might be able to see how my body's moving. When I get some more cameras sorted out, I think we'll be looking at possibly a 5 camera system, maybe 6, and just so I can make sure that I can catch as many different angles as possible for you. I'm going to start the lathe up a bit, speed it up a little bit more, and the edge on this gouge is beginning to go. I can feel it not cutting particularly well, so I'll just switch over to a clean gouge, or a freshly sharpened gouge at least. I think it's a good idea to have a couple of bowl gouges to hand when you're turning. There's some really hard wood round here. It's really hard. Not that it's giving the gouge too much problem, but I can feel it. That's very hard. Look at that figure. Lovely. And I think that's probably just turned through those check marks now. We'll see in a minute. Now I've got a big bump here. Shame you can't see it because my overhead camera is being used elsewhere at the moment. But I've got a bump that I need to smooth out. I don't like it very much. And next week, no, not next week, the week after next, I think it is, we're going to be looking at shapes in a demonstration called the Thinking Turner's Turn, and we're going to look at essentially composing a bowl mathematically and scientifically. I've done it before a few years ago in a video I put on my YouTube channel, but this time we're going to take it sort of one step further and add a few other bits and pieces to it that you might find interesting. So I'm just going to stop there for a second and sharpen the gouge up, or the gouges. Come on, because I want to start putting some final cuts on there. Oh yes, that's going to be nice. So So I'll just put some finishing cuts on there just to smooth out the surface, and then if you get your questions ready for when I finish that, I'll be very happy to answer any questions. Okay, there we go, that'll do. Right, so just a few more cuts on here to just clean up that surface a little bit. I'm quite happy with the shape. So let's just have a look at just a few little finishing cuts. Now remember, you might know from previous demonstrations I don't use a pull cut. Sorry, I don't use a push cut very often. So I prefer to do a pull cut with the handle a long way down, and it doesn't give a finish quite as smooth as a push cut, but it is more than acceptable. It gives a more than acceptable surface for when it comes to sanding it down. There's a little hard lump there. It just dinks the gouge just a little bit. That'll do, I think. Yeah, gosh, look at that. I might change the exposure on the camera a little bit, especially when we get this nice and shiny, because it'll overexpose the top of the bowl. Okay. Right, so that's the shape done. Who has any questions for me? Leisure, when will you do a thread chasing live? When Leisure, when I've practiced it. Matt Held, I placed an order on the 28th of April, but nothing from Hampshire Sheen. Assume I just send an email through the website. Matt, as far as I'm aware, it's all gone. There are no orders left here. But yeah, if you send me an email via the website, and I'll look at it for you in the morning. But as far as I'm aware, actually, Matt, what did you order? Actually, Matt, I don't want to be talking shop tonight. Send me an email through the website, and I will look at it for you in the morning. Mark Wallington, what's the difference in tool presentation between a pull cut and a shear scrape? Can you show us that guide you use to mark the jaw position? Yeah, Mark, there's the speed sizer. It's available from Axminster and was developed by Chris Fisher, the blind wood turner. Super easy to use, super handy. Rob, what's the difference between a push cut and a pull cut? Bear with me a sec and I will show you. You should be able to see this on your screen. A pull cut like this is the one that I was using, so you can see there the gouge is being pulled round the shape of the bowl, like I was doing. And a push cut, where is it? It's all changed. Oh, there we are. And a push cut, you push the toe round the side of the bowl like that. I prefer doing a push cut because I prefer a pull cut because as you come round the side of the bowl like this, there is a tendency to, or you can start to push the toe a little bit further into the bowl, than you actually need, so I prefer pulling round rather than pushing round. The push cut does give a better surface than the pull cut, but because it's going to be sanded down anyway, I prefer the pull cut, and also it gives me slightly better control over the shape that I want, rather than a push cut, and it's less prone to catches too. Clive, can you use embellishing wax and intrinsic colours together, and in what order? Yes, Clive, you absolutely can. Colour it first, or colour it first, then use a single coat of sanding sealer, and then use the embellishing waxes, and then put your final finish over the top of that. The rocking wood turner, do you put colour on first before Danish oil? Yes. I ought to do a little screen thing actually. So if you've got a pen and paper handy, write this down. I'll give you a second. There you go. Turn it, sand it, colour it, seal it, finish it. There you go. So the colour always goes onto bare wood with the technique that I use. There are loads of other techniques out there, but the technique that I use and I recommend is you apply the colour to bare wood, and then you put your finishes over the top of that. Hello, PL Wood Turning. Keith Calloway, how is the width of the bowl gouge measured in this country? That's a good one, Keith. I believe we actually measure the width of the bar itself, and in American measurements they measure across the flute. So we measure across the bar, and the Americans measure across the flute, or it could be the other way around. But I think we do the bar. I'm pretty certain we do the bar. Somebody may well pipe up and put me right, but yes, I'm pretty sure we measure across the bar. Dewey Shed, where did you get the blank? Can't remember. It's been around for ages. Curious, if pushcut gives a better finish, why do you choose not to use it more? Thomas, I thought I said that. A pull cut is less catchy. It gives me better control over the shape, and also being left-handed, I find it quite tricky. But because the surface is going to be sanded anyway, to me it makes no odds which one I use. Paul, going back to the last demo, did you post a video turning the tenon off? No, I didn't, Paul. I will probably do that on Saturday. I will certainly get the tenon off this on Saturday, and I will use the vacuum chuck on Saturday. Darren Spurgeon, have you ever made a sphere? Yes, I have, and I use Paul Howard's sphere jig for that, and I dare say in the future there will be a demonstration using it. Martin Kavanagh. Martin, would it be easy as a learner to use a Shape S tool rest? That's a good question, Martin. I've got an S-shaped tool rest and I hate it. It forces me into a shape that I don't want, and although a straight tool rest like I'm using at the moment could potentially also force me into a shape I don't want, I find the curved tool rests push me a little bit too far, so I stick with a flat one. PL Woodton, can I put a coat of high gloss wax before lacquer, or just sanding sealer? Just sanding sealer. Whenever you go to put a lacquer on, you should always put lacquer on over the top of a sealer rather than a wax, because the lacquer needs something to stick to and wax is a little bit slippery. Oh, Phil, right, we measure the flute over here and the Americans measure the bar. That's fine. It doesn't really bother me which way it's measured. I just know I like a 3/8 bowl gouge. T-shirt for the sequence. Yeah, we can do that. Right, I'm gonna crack on with this. Can you use both water-based and alcohol-based dyes together? Scott Hampton, yes, you can. You do need to be careful with it though, and I would use the water-based ones first. But the intrinsic colour range that I produce are soluble in both water and alcohol. So you may find that one may start to reactivate the other. So just be careful. Tornado wood turning. Hi Scott, you mentioned about colours being affected by the wood colour. Would bleaching the wood get a more neutral colour to start from? It may do, depending upon how dark the wood is in the first place, Scott, because a wood bleach is not going to completely bleach the wood. If you've got really dark hair and you throw some peroxide in it, it doesn't completely lighten it. It will lighten it considerably, but you've just got to be careful that whatever the base colour is of the wood, whether or not you've bleached it, will have an effect on the overall colour when you put it on. James at Wessex Technical. Martin, on your sand colour seal finish system, where would you put Yorkshire grit? If you're not using colour, then you colour it, sand it, grit it, finish it. James. So if you're using Yorkshire grit, I am still working on a technique of using colours with Yorkshire grit. So you would do sand it, grit it, finish it. Thank you very much, the Rocking Wood Turner. I appreciate you saying that. Cool. Right, are we done for questions now? Cool. That was hard going. Quick fire questions. Wow. Now, let me just clarify a point on the bendy tool rests. I don't like them. I've tried them. I don't like them. They're not the right shape for the bowl shape that I do. So I choose to stick with the straight one. It's horses for courses, and of course there's more ways. There's more than one way to skin a fish. There's more than one way to skin a fish. Where did that come from? Sorry, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way to gut a fish. There you go. Right, let's get this sanded down, shall we? I'll tell you what. I'll sort a T-shirt out with turn it, sand it, colour it, seal it, finish it. There you go. Paul Kavanagh, was that the ball jig? It's Paul Howard's sphere jig, so yeah, you could call it a ball jig. Karen Browning, I didn't miss Phil's comment. I chose to ignore it. Okay, let's get some sanding done. I need a sander. I'm going to use the inertia sander as usual, and looking at the surface here, I can see there are a few tool marks there, but with a piece of wood this hard, I'm not really surprised. And when I've sanded it, I will adjust the exposure on the camera. So mask on, air filter on, and extractor as well. Don't forget your mask when you are sanding, very important. So I've got the extractor running, which is just there, and I've got the air filter as well. And as I said, I'm going to start with 120 grit, and then I'm going to go down to 180, 240, and then 400. Move that in a little bit. Slow the lathe down a touch. Get right in there to the foot. Keep the head of the tool moving across the surface. You can see the tool marks here, I think. So I'm just going to put the fan on again.
So excuse me while I sort this out. Oh, wrong one. This fan will just help divert some of the air down the chute. I've got a leak in the system somewhere. That's better. Dara, thank you very much. And you're very welcome for the instructions. I'm glad you're finding them useful. Lathe is a little bit too quick. I don't like it when the sanding head starts to buzz. So I'm going to stop there just to see. I've got one little tool mark that's left here. And I definitely want to get rid of that. Because any tool mark, any tear out or any sanding mark that you leave in the piece is going to highlight the colour that you put on it. Sorry, the colour is going to highlight that mark there. You see that mark there? That's definitely nowhere near good enough yet. Now, one thing, a few people have asked me about sanding in reverse. I generally don't teach sanding in reverse because not everybody's lathe can run in reverse. So I generally don't do it. But in this case, I am going to do it, and I'm going to do it exceptionally carefully. Because the lathe is running in reverse, friction can occasionally undo the chuck. So to counter that, I'm going to bring the tool rest, the tailstock up, just to hold that in place, just in case anything untoward should happen. Flick the lathe in reverse. Now you will be able to see what I'm doing here, because rather than working beneath the bowl, I'm going to be working up here instead. It feels very strange to be working high, but it does work. It certainly feels very strange. And I think it's next week I'm doing a beginner's guide to sanding and finishing. That tool mark is beginning to go now. It's on quite a hard piece. It's on quite a hard area. So this is taking a little bit longer to sand down than sorry, it's taking a little bit longer to sand down than I would normally hope for, but it's got to be right. If it's not right, then that mark is going to stay there forever, and obviously, nearly gone. Obviously we don't want that mark to stay there forever, particularly if we're looking at selling a piece. It's got to be perfect. I've just changed to a new disc. and I think you might be able to hear how much better this new disc sounds compared to the old one. Okay, let's get this going forwards again. That's got rid of that mark. So I'll just finish that off with the lathe going forwards before moving down to 180. Now the length of time it takes to sand a piece will depend on a couple of factors. The first one will be your tool presentation. If you leave loads and loads of tool marks in it, it's going to take you longer to sand it down. And let's face it, not everybody likes sanding. I do, I love sanding, so I could do it all day. But not everybody enjoys sanding. So the better your tool presentation in the first part, the better your tool presentation in through the turn, the less sanding you're going to have to do. Let's just have a look at that. And what I'm doing here is I'm just checking to make sure that any sanding marks left from the 120 grit have gone, which they have. And then I can go from 180 down to 240, and I'm going to keep an eye on the piece, and any sanding marks there that I saw left over from the 180 grit, I'm going to make sure that the 240 grit gets rid of. And I'm keeping the tool moving all the time so it doesn't leave me with any flat spots. There we are. I'm going to leave the 240 grit there and then scoot down to 400. The lathe at the minute is 748 miles an hour. There we are, that'll do. What am I looking for? Kitchen towel. Turn the fan off. Just give it a little wipe over. Let's get some of the surface dust off, and then we can see what we've got left. Right, I'm going to take my mask off now after I've blown the dust off the screen. There we are. Okay, I'm going to turn my take my mask off. I would definitely suggest leaving your masks on for a few minutes,
particularly if you haven't got an air filter. My air filter's up there, and it's a good one. It's the jet one, and it cleans the air in here 12 times an hour, which is really good. Jacques, how do you manage to avoid steaming your glasses with a mask? This one, Jacques, this particular one, it creates a seal all round your nose and mouth, and the glasses just sit on top of the on top of there, so there's no chance of it. There's no chance of it. My glasses steaming up. Right. Oh gosh, that feels nice. Now, I said on Facebook a couple of hours ago that I'll be doing this piece kind of blues and greens, which is exactly what we're going to do. So I need some gloves. Gloves are really important when it comes to when it comes to colouring, because they're not called dyes, or rather they're called dyes for a reason. Okay, right. Now, normally with my where's it gone? Normally with my colouring stuff, I recommend putting a black base on first, but for this one we're not. We're going to put a dark blue. We'll start with a midnight blue on the base. Let me just get the tool rest into the right place. Sorry. I like to have the tool rest over on my right hand side, so I like to have the tool rest over on my right hand side so I can hang the kitchen towel on it. So the base colour for this is going to be two colours actually. I've just changed my mind. I'm going to do a base colour of midnight blue and forest green. I'll start with the midnight blue. Oh, sorry. There you go. I'm going to start with the midnight blue. So I'm going to put two coats of both of them on. And I'll make sure that they're nice and even. I'm going to whiz through this colouring thing because you're not really here to see colouring, you want to see some lacquering, so we'll do that. Let's put a little bit of blue over there as well, why not? Mix it up a bit. And then some forest green. I want to make this piece look good because this is the piece that's going to be on show all week. So there's some forest green going on. Make sure it's nice and even, that's really important. And you can see here, I think, how it's beginning to highlight the figure already. Didn't sand in there very well, did I? And I think we're going to have time, it's only 20 past 8, we're going to have time to do a sort of a major colouring job on this, if you don't mind. Because the figure in here is so good, we're going to do the normal colouring bits and pieces to it, and then we'll do a little bit of sanding to it, and then a little bit more colouring, and then perhaps a little bit more sanding, just so we can get, you know, thousands of shades of colour and layers of texture going on. That's the second coat of the blue, and then we'll go with the second coat of the green. Blend those two, whoops, blend these two in nicely. dry them off, and then we can sand them off. Dry them off rather, then we can sand it back. So I'm just using a hot air gun just to dry them off. Be very careful when using a hot air gun. If you get the piece too hot, it can start to crack. So make sure you keep the piece moving all the time. Okay, right. I'm just going to adjust the exposure on. Whoops. Sorry. Just going to adjust the exposure on the tool rest cam here. Just turn the brightness down a little bit. I think that looks okay. Right. Now, just as normal, after you've got the base coat, the dark base coat on, you need to sand some of it back. And we do that because the colours are going to sink deeper into the softer parts of the wood than they are in the harder parts. So if we sand off some of the wood, some of the colour rather, we'll find that we end up with a really patchy looking texture where the colour's gone deeper into the softer parts of the wood than the harder parts. And I'm going to do this backwards and stick my mask back on and the extractor on. I'm going to do this backwards. So I'm going to start with 400 grit and see how much colour that takes off. And then if I don't like that, I'll go back to 240, and if I don't like that, I'll go back to 180. So you've got to make sure that you get this as cleanly done as possible, so you don't end up with any lines around it. So that's taken some off, and you can see here that the where it's coming off the harder parts of the wood. Cool. I'll take a little bit more off with the 400, but I think I'm going to go back to the 240. Because I don't think that 400 is going to take off enough colour. No, I need a little bit more. Phil? Phil, you've just run. So I'm going to go back to 240. Phil has just given me a call, everybody, so bear with me a second. Oh, okay, it was Phil. Okay, right. So I'm going to go back to 240, and this will take off a little bit more of the colour. There we are, and you can see there now how it's becoming a little bit more patchy. I want to take a little bit more off the top here. Yeah, that's good. Now, because we've gone back to 240, the surface isn't quite ready for colour yet, so we've got to go back down to 400 to smooth it all out again. So I'll do a couple of light passes with the 400 grit just to get the surface back down to where I want it. Super, that looks suitably manky now. Right. Okay, remember, keep your mask on for a couple of minutes after you finish sanding, and leave your air filter on as well. Right, so hopefully you can see that. It still looks a little bit overexposed on the top. So I will just quickly change that exposure again. Just darken it down a little bit more. There we are, that should be, that's about as good as I can get it actually, unless I unplug that light. Not that one. That one. There you go, try that. That might be a little bit better. So, colour wise, what are we going to put on it? I said reds, no I didn't, that's my normal spiel. Let's do blues and greens, and maybe a little bit of purple thrown in as well, just to see how that looks. So we've got some forest green here, and some pear green, and we'll get some honey just in case, and some plum. So if you didn't know already, I'm using the Intrinsic Colour Collection made by a friendly, helpful company called Hampshire Sheen here in the UK. They're water-based colours. I like water-based colours because I find alcohol-based colours almost force me to work quickly, and I don't like to rush if I can't help it. Where's the sky blue? Let's get some sky blue. Right, let's have a look at this. We've got a bit of midnight blue on there and a little bit of forest green already. So we'll put some sky blue on, which is a nice bright blue, and I'm going to put it across the midnight blue and the forest green. So that will obviously create, that looks a little bit like a sea green there actually now. A little bit more blue. And you can see here how it's all highlighting the figure that I was getting so excited about earlier. Get another piece of towel and we'll put on some pear green. That's quite a lot of pear green actually, and we'll start that over here. It looks really quite yellow, but it isn't. It is actually green unless I've mislabeled a bottle. And we'll put a little bit there as well. I'm not really worrying about where I put the colour, just so long as it's nicely blended together, it's not going to bother me at all. And a bit of forest green. And then we'll put a little bit of blue in there as well. So we'll go with a little bit of midnight blue. Where is it? There it is. And we'll squeeze some midnight blue in there. Right, and I'm going to dry that off. Dry that off with a hot air gun, and we'll sand it back again. This time though, I'm only going to sand it back with 400 grit, not go back to 240. I don't think. So extractor on, whip my mask on quickly as well.
Can't see anything. So I'll just whip a bit of that off with the 400. Make sure it's as even and as smooth as possible so you don't end up with lines.
There we are, and then we can go back to the colours. So we've got a mixture of all sorts of different shades there now. So I'm going to throw in a little bit of plum, which is a really nice purple colour, or sort of aubergine shade. Why am I saying it's aubergine? It's called plum because it's a plum colour. So that's going over some reds, sorry, that's going over some blues, and it's going over some of the green as well, so that's going to blend together and create a whole host of different shades. Let's go for a lighter green. And we'll put some of the pear green on as well. And again, that's going over some of the darker green too, and we'll put a little bit of sky blue on as well. Oop. So I put the sky blue directly over the pear green there, which is going to blend it on the towel before it goes on, so that will give us yet another shade. So we are going to be playing with lots and lots of different shades of colour here tonight. And then we'll put some midnight blue straight over the top of that. And I've got to be very careful because at the moment it's looking a little bit blocky, and I don't like it when it looks blocky, so we're going to have to mix it up a little bit. Now remember, when you're doing this, don't push the colours into the wood. Let the wood absorb as much as it wants to. What have I just done? I can't remember. Oh well, let's put some more sky blue on. Doesn't really matter because we're not looking to highlight anything in particular at the moment. Let's give that a little dry off and see how it looks. If you're not sure how something's going to look, don't be afraid to dry it off. Okay, I'm going to really lightly go over that with some 400 grit. I'm not going to worry about the mask this time. Really quickly, there we are. That's all that needs. A little bit of plum. So here we are, we're going over with the sort of the final coats of colour now. So it's important that these are really nicely blended together. But I'll show you how, after I've done this, I'll quickly show you how you can blend the colours together after they're dry, because you can still do it. And I think it'll be useful for you to find out. Let's put a little bit of midnight blue on there as well. 436 people, hello everybody. I hope you're well. If you've just joined us, a big welcome to you. And let's put a little bit of, let's go with some sky blue in there. Oops. Oh, I don't need the extractor on anymore, do I? Okay, so this is now looking really moody. So I'm going to dry that off and then I'll blend them together a little bit more. Before we look at highlighting the piece, what time is it? 20 to 9. There we are. Now, although these colours are quite nicely blended already, I love this green into purple here. That looks really super. If you grab some methylated spirits, or if you're watching in the US, methylated spirits is known as denatured alcohol. We can get denatured alcohol over here, but methylated spirits is just fine. And if you get some meths, this is the mess, if you get some meths on the towel, you can wipe it over the top of the piece, and that'll just help to blend it down a little bit. You can see a little bit coming off the surface, and it'll just help to blend those colours a little bit. You don't have to do this step if you don't want to. This is just an extra little something I've thrown in tonight, and I might put a little bit more purple on there, a little bit more of the plum, just to enrich that a little bit. Like I said before, you know, I don't want to spend too long on the colour. I want to spend more time on the finishing of it for you tonight, but this piece is too nice to not do a proper job of colouring on. Let's get the plum in there. A little bit more meths and just blend that in. Whoops. Got it on my finger, no wonder I'm having trouble. There we are. That's better, that's blended that in nicely. Super nice. Okay, and then just like in my normal method, what we're going to do is highlight some of these areas of figure. Thank you very much, Colin. So I will take the 400 grit of paper. The 400 grit. Now, is that looking a little bit dark now? Yeah, it is a little bit. Right, and where we've got the figure here, you can see that. Thomas, thank you. Where we've got the colour blend here, we've got some really nice figure under there. So just over the top, just lightly over the top of the figure, I'm going to sand a little bit of that colour away. Just a little bit, just lightly. You can see I'm using the pad of my finger here just to take some of that colour off the surface. And anybody who's seen a few of my demonstrations will know what's going to come next. We're going to put a little bit of the honey colour in there, and that will just help to liven up that figure a little bit. Put a little bit of meths on it as well, just to mix it up a bit. But just to put a little twist in the tail of this, you can see there how that colour's coming round. Round here where we've got the figure in the blue, I'm going to sand that back all up here and a bit down there, and rather than put yellow in there, I'm going to put some of the sky blue instead. This side of the blank is particularly hard, and here as well. You can see those little bits just there. And we'll put some sky blue just in those areas. Oops. Midnight blue, sky blue. Some sky blue in there. This side of the blank is really quite hard, so it's not taking colour particularly well, but it's doing okay. Just dry that off a minute. There we go, and I think you can see there how the sky blue's just highlighted those areas there. Oops. Ooh. Throw it on the floor. Right, I want to do something in the plum here as well, but only very subtly. We've got some honey colour coming round there, so I'll probably just join that up just a little bit. And we'll use a clean piece of towel, or a clean part of an older towel. Put a little bit of colour on the edge and just flick that in there, just to kind of join it up a little bit. And that needs a blend with some of the meths, that does. There we are. Now what you can do, what we did, is Colin French still here? What we did when Colin came up to see me, probably 2 years ago now, what we did was we took the bowl off the lathe after we coloured it, and then we turned it face down and just sprayed it with the white spirit, not white spirit, the methylated spirit, denatured alcohol, and all the colour began to run. It looked absolutely gorgeous. Colin, has Rachel still got it? I'm sure she has. Right, so that will do for the colouring now. I'm quite happy with how that looks. I might put that other light back on. Doesn't make much difference. It's quite dark under there. Rocking wood turner, thank you. I might have to try and find a light to sit under there at some point. In fact, bear with me, I'll just see if I can illuminate under there with an angle poise light thing from IKEA. Let me see. If you don't have a go, you don't know, do you? So let's see if I can get that illuminated under there. There you go, how's that? That's better. That's a bit better, isn't it? Yeah, there you go. Now you can see a little bit better. That's cool. I'm liking that. Right, now we've got to start thinking about sealer. Sealer comes in all different shapes and sizes. There's loads of different manufacturers out there. There's acrylic ones and spray-on ones and cellulose ones, all sorts of different kinds of sealer, and they will all work just as well as the other in my experience. My personal preference is to use a thinned cellulose sanding sealer. This one in particular, in fact, let me just be really posh. That one. There it is. Hampshire Sheen sanding sealer. Now, I've said it before, and I end up saying it in most demonstrations. Depending upon who you talk to, some people will say use a neat sanding sealer straight out the bottle and don't thin it. Others say, like me, yeah, thin it down a bit. Ted Weeks, thank you very much. You're a star. So I like to thin my sanding sealer down, and that's because I like to make sure the surface that that the sealer produces on my bowls and stuff is how I want it. And having used full fat sanding sealers in the past, I find that it can be too much with one coat or even two coats. So by using a thinned sanding sealer, I've got that element of control to put on just the right amount. So there you go. As I said, there's more ways than one to skin a fish or gut a cat. Right, so I'm going to stop here because I need a drink. Does anybody have any questions? Dara has one there. Water will tone the colours down if I'm not mistaken, whereas methyl DNA will help blend. Dara, if you add water to the colours, they're already to use straight out of the bottle anyway, but if you use water you will get a lighter shade. If you use the white, like in the demonstration the other week, you will get a pastel shade, and if you use denatured alcohol it will help blend them, yes. Is it Adam Nodine to say, Jackson, is it wrong to say I like the smell of Hampshire Sheen sanding sealer? No, Adam, it isn't. No, it's not wrong to say that at all. You shouldn't perhaps be snorting it or whatever, but it does smell a little bit like pear drops. But you know, it is a very heavy chemical smell, so you really need to be using it in a well ventilated area. Oh, why am I putting it away? I need to use it. Stuart in Guernsey, is there another way you can donate? Yeah, tell you what, Stuart, you could buy a t-shirt. You could buy a Woodturners Funnel Club t-shirt or a hoodie or something like that. They're all on my website at msabensmith.com. They're all there, and also I will get up a fun little t-shirt saying turn it, sand it, colour it, seal it, finish it. I'll get that up at some point in the next few days. Any other questions at all? Can you use too much colour? Rene, good question. Rene is the Hampshire Sheen distributor in Denmark, and he's been doing a great job over there, showing off the products in Denmark. Can you use too much colour? Will it hide the structure of the wood? Rene, I have put loads of colour on pieces, and I've never known it to actually hide the wood. There's quite a lot of colour on here, and the wood is beginning to disappear a little bit, but as soon as you put the sealer on top, it will start to take a little bit of that colour off the surface, which you'll see in a minute, and then beneath that you will see the gorgeous figure in the wood. Greg and Cat Longbike, is the PTFE lube on your lathe safe to use around the lacquer finish? PTFE lube? I haven't got any. Oh yes, I do. It's up there. Yeah, I'm going to put something down on the lathe to protect the lathe bed, which is always a good idea when using spray products. Ba-ba-da-ba-dum. Can we get Hampshire Sheen Huffer t-shirts? I'm not entirely certain what you mean there, JJ. Turner Steve's going shopping for Emma's parking ingredients. Awesome. Right, okay. I had the last one, but I missed the start. Did Martin make a cheese sandwich? No, I didn't, Phil. If I do some kind of baking thing or cooking thing or a multiple demo, it will be on a Saturday. Ivor Longwalk, would you colour the bottom of the bowl after the tenon is taken off? Either tune in on Saturday and you'll find out. But no, I won't, generally. Hewig, thank you very much. Right, a few of you are talking about spray caps. I'm out of spray caps and they are incredibly rare at the moment. The internet's just gone a little bit squiffy. So hopefully it will steady itself out again in a second. Yeah, a few of you I can see are asking about spray caps. They are rare at the moment. I can't find them anywhere at all. The last lot went out last week. Somebody said Ed Oliver's got some. I think Axminster might have some. Yandles and maybe even Turner's Retreat. Thank you, Adam. Right, let's get some sanding sealer on here, shall we? And hopefully the stream's going to settle itself down. So we're going to go through probably 3 or 4 coats of sanding sealer here, and I'll explain why as we go. So the first coat's going to go on. And you've got to get the sanding sealer on quickly and evenly so it doesn't leave any tide marks when it's drying off. That's important, that. And as you can see, Rene, some of the colour has come off the surface there. And so the sealer will do a similar job to oil. It will help make the grain pop, and also, as you can see here, it's really making those colours pop as well. And it's gone a little bit dark. So let's just sort that out a little bit. Mick Fagan, is the Sheen sealer, Hampshire Sheen sealer, thinned? It is already thinned, Mick. Yes, it's ready to use straight out the bottle, and you can thin it down further if you want to. Right, so I'm going to let that coat of sealer dry off first before we put another one on. Oh, hang on. James at Wessex Technical, I will be sorting out a joint live with Emma at some point in the not too distant future. Right, the internet connection is a little bit wonky here, so I'm just going to drop a line to my internet guy and just tell him, and he might be able to sort something out. Oh, it's come back up again. Would you believe it? Paul Campy, thank you very much. Right, now I'm not sure if you can see this, but that sealer has now dried off mostly. But what I want is the surface to look a little bit patchy. Clockwork Bard, am I correct in thinking that if I'm turning bowls for food, that once it's been turned I just oil it and let that be that? Clockwork Bard, yes you can. On the outside you can do what you like. I'm actually going to turn this into a salad bowl or fruit bowl on Saturday when I hollow out the inside. So you can do whatever you like on the outside of a bowl, whatever you want really. But on the inside, that's where a simple oil finish or a simple food safe wax finish on the inside will be all that's required. Right, let's get another coat of wax, another coat of sealer on here. I want the surface to look a little bit patchy. James Cassidy, thank you very much. Oop. I want the surface to look a little bit patchy with the sealer. When it does look patchy, then I know all of the pores in the wood have been filled by the sealer, and you can see here it's looking a little bit streaky. That's where it's being sucked into the wood by the grain. Oops, tidy up that bit. This is quite a thirsty piece of wood actually. Where was I? Oh yes, and it's really important that you let the sealer dry between coats, because if you put loads of sealer on and then put loads more sealer on, what happens is the top dries, but the stuff underneath hasn't dried properly, so it's still a little bit wet, it's still a little bit tacky. So when you spin the lathe up after you've put your finish on, what happens is that those solvents will start to dissolve the sealer that's on top, and then ultimately they'll start to dissolve the finish that you've put on. So you've got to make sure that the sealer is dry in between each of your coats. Adam, don't worry about the internet connection. This is a brand new setup, and the guy who looks after the internet is sorting it out. So don't worry about that. The guy who looks after my internet is a freelance network engineer. I won't go into the ins and outs of what the internet situation here is. It's incredibly complicated, but he's on it and we're back up, so don't worry. Yes, I did spill a little bit of sealer, Marky. Right, I can put a bit more sealer on there now. I'm going to put this coat on relatively thickly and just let that absorb in. That's another way that you can speed up the process. And you can see there it's beginning to look a little bit on the patchy side, which is what I want. And it's beginning to settle on the surface. You can see that there quite well. Here is very thirsty, so that needs a little bit more. I think you might even be able to see that just absorb in. It's not drying, that's just being sucked in. So there'll be a few minutes before we get this sorted. So who has some other questions for me just while I finish messing around with this? Yeah. I'm on coffee as well. I really ought not to be on coffee at this time of night, but yeah, that's dry. That's beginning to dry off on the surface now, and it's beginning to look matte and a little bit patchy, which is what I want. 464 people. Wow, thank you for joining in, everybody. We will get on to the lacquer part of this demonstration very soon, I promise. Jean Doucette, what's your favourite wood? I love turning sycamore and I love turning maple. Ash is nice, so sort of in order. Sycamore, maple, they're joint first. Ash is really nice, cherry's really nice. I'm not very keen on oak. I find oak to be pretty boring most of the time, as I do sapele. But I did do a very nice sapele piece on Saturday. Frederick Day, have you ever suffered from colour permeating into the inside of a bowl as there is no sealer on first? Frederick, you would need, in order for the colour to permeate through, on sycamore or maple for example, you'd need to turn a bowl with walls less than 5mm thick before you stand a chance of the colour leaching through to the inside of the bowl. And with ash, being careful, again 5 to 10mm, something like that, will be the minimum wall thickness. But then you could always put sealer on the inside. I mean, I like to have the colours penetrate the wood, whereas sealer will seal the wood so the colours will sit on the surface, and that doesn't look quite right in my opinion. Do you have DL Wood Art? Do you have unthinned sealer, or is it all thinned? DL Wood Art, I do have full fat sealer, as it were, but I thin it down. I don't like using full fat sealer. So yes, in answer to your question, it's all thinned. Dave Flanagan, do you adjust the amount of coats you put on the piece depending upon the timber that you're using? David, absolutely right. Yes, I do. If I'm using a tight grain wood like this, like sycamore or maple or cherry or yew or something like that, I'll still put on enough sealer to seal the wood properly, but when it comes to things like ash and oak and elm and chestnut, the open grain woods, I normally find 2 or 3 coats is going to be enough, because no matter how much sealer you put on with the open grain, you're never going to seal that over properly. So if I do want to seal the grain up properly in woods like oak and ash, I'll use an embellishing wax over the top. Richard Parker, how do you prevent a lot of colour blending and coming off when you use the sealer? Richard, you don't. You just get on with it. The colour is penetrated into the wood, so the sealer's not going to pull that back out of the wood. What the sealer's doing is essentially cleaning up the surface for you. Ray Heaton, I think your silver wall clock has stopped. What, up there? That's my set of coal jaws. Stephen Rickett, does cherry colour well with your intrinsic colours? I tried the embellishing waxes and it didn't show too well, as I think it's close grain. Stephen Rickett, that's absolutely right. The embellishing waxes are designed for use on open grain woods such as oak and ash, or elm, or chestnut, that kind of thing. And if you want to use the embellishing waxes on a closed grain wood like cherry, then apply some texture to it by using a texturing tool, and then put the wax in that added texture. Are your colours compatible with a friction polish? Yeah, it should be, so long as you sealed it properly, Jacques. Hello Caitlin, how are you? Nice to see you. Dara, oh, you're in Louisiana. John Foster, is it worth using a dryer on the sealer to help the drying process? John, yes you can, and that's a good question, because I forgot to mention it. You can use a dryer if you want to, but being cellulose, it's essentially plant fat that's in there, and if you get it too hot, what can happen is it can start to congeal, and it's an absolute nightmare to get rid of. So I just tend to let it dry naturally, or give it a little bit of a helping hand with a kitchen towel just like that. But you don't want to be doing it too much, because that can also leave lines in it. Thankfully I didn't leave any lines in it that time, but that hasn't actually dried off just yet. But I will give it a little bit of a hand because time is ticking. Remember, I don't normally recommend doing this because it can congeal and melt the sealer essentially. So that will at least give it a little bit of a hand. Right, let's get another coat of sealer on. Now I'm being particularly picky about the sealer on this, because it's got to be sealed properly. If you're using a wax finish, if you're using a wax finish, then one could argue that you don't have to be quite so picky about sanding sealer. But because we're going for a lacquer finish, and lacquer's expensive stuff generally, you want to make sure that the lacquer sits on the surface and doesn't start doing the job of the sealer by being sucked into the wood. It will do a little bit, but by putting on enough sealer you can eliminate that as much as possible. Donald Carter, how long do you leave Danish oil to dry before a second coat? Good question, Donald. I normally leave it at least, well, actually, if I'm doing oil, I will look at oil on Saturday for you, just like I did last Saturday. This piece, let me find it, here it is. This piece that we did on Saturday in the Making Sapele Interesting demonstration, this has had 3 coats of oil on, 20 minutes between each coat, and then left overnight to dry, or left since Saturday to dry, and that's all the finish that's going to get. I'm not going to put any more finish on it than that. So 20 minutes between each coat, Donald. Boop, 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 boop. Hi Gentle Turn, how are you? Nice to see you, Martin, and Germany. Okay, right, this is it's getting there, and if you can, let me just put this on. You can see here, right at the, if you just look right at the top of your screen, let's just pull that up a little bit. Ugh. There you go. How about that? You can see here round the top here is sealed nicely, but just here we've got essentially a bald patch, and then it's sealed nicely under there as well. So one more coat of sanding sealer I think, and then I'm going to give up. Well, not give up, but just hit it with lacquer, because as I said earlier, I do want to be home before 11 o'clock. So I'm going to put this one on again fairly thick, try and leave some sitting on the surface that we can denib. You can almost see it being sucked in. Yeah, look, that's just gone straight back in. If you watch that, it's just going to disappear. There it goes. Okay. Ivor Pudifund, yes, that Sapele piece is very interesting. Edmonton, Alberta. Hi, Gordon. Proper international audience again tonight. Thanks for joining in, everybody. Caitlin, how many coats of sealer have you done? 4 now, I think it is, Caitlin. But Caitlin, I use a thinned sanding sealer to give me the absolute best control over the surface that the sealer produces for me. I'm not one to use neat sanding sealer, so the sealer I'm using is pre-thinned, and it just gives me an extra level of control. It takes a little bit longer to put it on to get the surface that I want, but I know that when I'm done, the surface is exactly how I want it before I put my final finishes on. Matt Held saw the stream on Tuesday and thought it was nice, but that's very kind of you, Matt. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to leave the lathe spinning just for a minute, just to help it on its way. And I will give it a little going over with the hot air gun as well. Because although I'm very picky about my sanding sealer and making sure that the surface is absolutely perfect, I do get a little bit bored. Julian Clifford, hello! Caitlin, you are very welcome. Okay, that's nearly there. I'm going to leave it a little bit longer because remember there are solvents in cellulose sanding sealer, and if you haven't let all of those solvents evaporate off and dry off completely, then they will start to dissolve the finish that you've put on. Right, let's just reorganize that. I'm just going to adjust the focus as well. For those of you who have been here before, this little thing here just helps me with the focus. So there's, oops. Turn the autofocus back on. There. Apply. Good. There we are. So that should be nice and sharp. Yeah, looking good. Right. Here is a piece that I've done using this particular lacquer method before. And as you can see there, that is looks like it's almost been dipped in glass. So that is the level of finish that we are looking at getting this week. It is not a quick finish at all, but the finish is absolutely sublime. And in order to get an absolutely sublime finish, you can't mess around, you can't cut corners, you've got to make sure that each step is done as perfectly as you possibly can. Right, okay, now let's have a look here and put some glasses on. The piece is not sealed as well as I want to. There's a big strip round here that really needs more sealer, but I'm not going to mess around with it tonight because you guys are being very patient, so I will explain what I will do to it later. Right, the sealer, when it's dry and it's sitting on the surface like it is in places here, is going to feel a little bit lumpy. Die Pratt, will this technique transfer to shellac? Yes, it will. So if it feels a little bit lumpy, a little bit scratchy, i.e. it's not smooth anymore, you need to denib the surface. You'll hear people talking about denibbing quite regularly on demonstrations and stuff like that, and there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can either use one of these, which is a grey Scotch-Brite pad. They say it's not abrasive, and you don't have to be particularly careful, or you can use a lump of shavings like this. So I'm going to use the shaving method, and all you do with that, make sure that you're using the shavings from the piece you've turned, or at least the same species, and we'll just rub them over the surface, and you can see that that's beginning to shine up now already, and that's just smoothing out the surface of that sanding sealer. And actually that is a lot better than I thought it was now that's been denibbed. And you can see, I think, I've been saying that I want the surface to look, what's the word I'm looking for? Patchy. And that's exactly how it's looking at the minute. So we have actually done a good job of the sanding sealer, which is awesome. So I'm just going to make sure that's nicely denibbed. I don't want to get it too hot because you can still ruin the seal or ruin the sealer by getting it too hot. Brush the lathe down. Yes, that's almost exactly how I like it. Now there was a question there, quite a long one. Stephen Rickett. Martin, using your high gloss, how long should you leave it until buffing? If it's still tacky to touch, should you leave it a bit longer? Stephen, I normally leave it until it is, well, I buff it at all different stages, but I generally leave it till it's a little bit tacky. Not completely dry. That's going to give you a really bad job, a really hard job. So make sure if you are buffing the gloss wax that you do it when it's just still tacky. Frederick Dale, saw the video where you made a similar bowl with a Glasslike finish and you dropped it. Yes, thank you for the reminder, Frederick. But I won't be taking this off the lathe until Saturday now, so. Now I need to protect the lathe bed, so I'm going to put down a couple of bits of cardboard just on the lathe bed, and I'm also going to move the stream deck, put that up there, give that something to protect it as well. Right, whoop, nearly push it off. There we go. Now one thing I do need to do is just wrap a little bit of tape around the tenon. You don't have to do this, but you will need to recut the tenon in order to reverse mount the piece. So I'm going to use some frog tape just around there. I don't want to recut the tenon, but I don't mind recutting the base of it here. David McClernand's in the house. Hi David. Right, there we go. That's just protected that. So the lathe's protected. I'm going to run a little bit of cheap masking tape around the chuck just to protect that as well. Wherever it's gone. Oh, there it is. Just a cheap bit of masking tape around the chuck and the faceplate. It is quite a big chuck. So there we are. That's just protected that. Now I'm going to use, funnily enough, I'm going to use Hampshire Sheen Clear Gloss Spray Lacquer, of course. Give it a good shake. Now it is quite cold in here at the moment. I'm very good, thank you, David. Now it is quite cold in here at the moment, so ideally I'd like the lacquer to be a little bit warmer, so it comes out a little bit cleaner. Excuse the noise. Give it a good shake for a couple of minutes just to make sure that it's all nicely mixed up inside the can. Now one thing with the, hang on, let me grab the other one, or grab the other nozzle. One thing with the Hampshire Sheen lacquer is I supplied two nozzles with it. One of them, this one, the white one, it has a round spray pattern, and the red one that comes with it has a vertical or a horizontal spray pattern, depending upon which way you turn the nozzle. So if you like a vertical or horizontal spray pattern, then use that nozzle. but I prefer the round one, so I'm using that one. And each can comes with both of those. Take that off. Right. And I'm going to switch the air filter on again and make sure that you use this stuff in a well ventilated area. And might be worth thinking about perhaps having a window open, and certainly wear a mask. For the purposes of this demonstration, I won't. The air filter I have here has the charcoal. I think it's charcoal, but it's got the gassy filter on the front, so there won't be too many fumes around for too long. But make sure that you do take precautions to protect your lungs and your eyes, of course. Martin, gentle turn. Does the rotating nozzle not stick? No, it doesn't. And should it stick, you just need a little pair of pliers just to twist it round. It'll be fine. Darren, do they sell your lacquer in Axminster? No, not at the moment, Darren. They don't sell it just at the minute. I think everybody else does. Hard work, this. Ooh. Okay, right. Switch to the other camera. Right, and what I want to do is I want to put on light coats to start with. Well, I want to put on light coats. And I'm going to do it not with the lathe running. I don't like putting lacquer on with the lathe running. I find I get a more precise coverage if I turn the lathe by hand. So obviously with the nozzle pointing away from you, I'm just going to put on a few light coats, keeping the lathe turning. Don't worry about missing a bit, because you will catch up with it later. And you'll notice here that I'm starting to spray when I'm off the piece, and then stopping the spray when I'm off the piece. So it's on, across the piece, off. I'm not squirting straight onto the piece, because what will happen then is that you'll get a big splodge of lacquer on there, and it might start running. So if you just start spraying with the spray off the piece, you can make sure that you get a nice even coat. Don't put on too much to start with, because the last thing you want is any runs. And what you could do is you could just keep turning it just to make sure that you don't get any runs. But you can see already how shiny and how gorgeous. Look at this figure here. This piece is going to be absolutely stunning when it's finished. Right, so now we need to leave that for a few minutes until it has virtually dried off. You should leave at least 20 minutes between each coat. At least 20 minutes, I'd say. Well, that's what it says on the instructions. Or at least until it's sort of touch dry. And then you can put on another coat. You can encourage it to dry if you want to, but you have got to be exceptionally careful, because the last thing you want is your lacquer to boil. And if it boils, what happens is it goes and it goes all pitty on the surface, and it is just a nightmare. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to encourage it to dry off with a cooler temperature as I can muster with this hot air gun. and I'm just going to keep the gun moving all the time and the piece moving all the time as well, because the last thing I want to do is mess this up. Yeah, and if you see here, remember where I was saying that it wasn't sealed absolutely perfectly? You can see where it's sunk into the wood there. But that's alright, a few more coats and that'll be sorted. Talk amongst yourselves for a bit while this is drying off. I don't want to put a second coat on too soon, because again, if you put a second coat of lacquer over the top of one that isn't at a point where it will accept a second coat of lacquer, the top one will dry and the bottom one won't. And likewise, if you put too much lacquer on, or if the environment that you're in is too humid, what can happen is that it starts to bloom, and that's when it tends to go a little bit foggy. You know, if you've ever done lacquer before and it goes foggy, that's generally, in my experience, two things. It's either too much or too many coats before the previous ones have dried, or your environment is a little bit on the humid side. So I'm just going to got to be very, very, very careful when you start touching lacquer if you're not sure if it's dry, because any contact is going to leave a mark. You see that bit there looks a little bit wet still, but up round here, oops, oh no, we're alright. Up round here it's gone in, it's been absorbed. No, that's okay. That bit there looks a bit suspect. Oh no, it's good, it's good. Right, we can do another one. It's fine, we can do another coat, we're alright. Right, here we go again, exactly the same technique. So we're going to start spraying off the piece. And I'm going to kind of change the angle that I'm spraying at as well. So what tends to happen is that there's a little bit of a build up around here, because that's obviously smaller. It doesn't matter that it's patchy, or if it goes on and it's patchy, because the number of coats we're going to be putting on is going to even all that up. And you've also one thing to bear in mind. Twisted Trees, thank you. One thing to bear in mind is, as you're going round, and you might see a slightly bare patch here that you've missed. Avoid the temptation to go psst and put a bit just there. Don't do that. Wait and make sure that you get that spot next time round. Don't be tempted to try and patch up a little bit that you might have missed. Just have some patience with it. Just have some patience with it. Let it dry, and then keep going with it. That's really important. Now on this piece here, I think there was at least 8 coats that went on this piece here. It might even have been 10. So we've got a really super Super deep shine there. Super deep shine. And each coat was left to dry before moving on. So just make sure that you let each coat dry, and don't be tempted to try and patch up a little bit. Let each coat and then just fill it up over periods of several coats. Questions, anybody? Tom Lazarus, how many coats do you put on? On this piece I will probably put on 2 or maybe 3 tonight, maybe 1 or 2 tomorrow, not sure. 2 during Thursday night's demonstration, and then I'll put a couple more coats on maybe Friday, so that'll be what, about 8 coats, and then Saturday I'll show you what I do to polish it up. Chris Sullivan, Turner's Retreat for clear gloss lacquer, the collection only. No idea why, Chris. I can send it to you. Leisure, thank you very much. Rubber dub wood. Do cold sheds in winter affect sealers and lacquers? As in they don't dry at all. I find it harder to get a decent finish in colder temperatures. Rubber dub wood, yeah, absolutely. The temperature will affect all of the products that you use, because the cooler temperatures, like in waxes, for example, the cooler temperature is actually going to shrink that wax a little bit in the tin, which is why in the winter, if you pick up a tin of wax, particularly the Hampshire Sheen stuff, because it's got such a high content of wax in it, and relatively speaking so little solvent, it might start to rattle a little bit. Sealer will thicken up perhaps. Lacquer is going to struggle a little bit, which is why you should always warm your lacquer a little bit, and perhaps very carefully on a radiator, just so it warms up and can flow out of the spray cap a little bit more. Winter months also tend to be a little bit more humid. The atmosphere is a little bit wetter, obviously, because there's more rain in the air, so that's going to affect the lacquer that you put on, and also the wax and the drying time of your colours and all sorts of stuff. So you've got to do what you can to do it slower, do it over perhaps a longer period of time, in order to make sure that you're not overdoing it, or you're not overdoing or overstretching the finish that you're putting on. Renee, what is your preferred finish? If you have a wood that you would like to change as minimum as possible, I tend to grab microcrystalline. Yes, microcrystalline wax is really good. It barely changes the colour of the wood. It does darken it down a little bit, but I will always use 1 or 2 coats of sealer underneath any finishing product. Ian Leonard, can I lacquer a bowl made some time ago and protect it at the time with wax? Ian, so long as you get rid of that wax, sand it all off, reseal the piece and go with the lacquer, yes you can. Lacquer doesn't stick particularly well to wax. Michael Driver, do you plan to wet sand any of the coats? Michael, no, not yet. We'll be doing a full finish on Saturday. Dave Shorten, do you have your full colours in stock yet? Yes, I believe they are all in stock now, Dave. If you head over to the website and check, I believe so. If not, then it'll be tomorrow. Designer mate, can the kind of crystalline wax be used over wood dye? Yes, it can. I put spray caps in warm water. That's a good idea, Frederick. That's a very good idea. Regina, do I get all the proceeds from the super chats? Just like with the advertising revenue, Regina, YouTube do take a small cut, yes. And it is only small as well. Adrian, could you use anything over a lacquered finish? Absolutely, Adrian, yes. I would suggest using a thin coat of microcrystalline wax, again, which we'll be doing on Saturday. Because lacquer tends to feel a little bit plasticky when it's dry. If you use a microcrystalline wax over the top, you get a double benefit. One, it feels a little bit more silky to the touch rather than plasticky, and also the microcrystalline wax will help protect it against fingerprints. Colin, no, they don't take 30%. Buster, thank you very much. Nice to see you. I'm looking forward to Thursday and the blood bikes as well. Right, that's now dried off a bit. Oh, no it hasn't. Let me just encourage that a bit. Oh, cool it down a bit. Caitlin, will lacquer go over milliput? It should be absolutely fine over milliput, Caitlin. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't, so long as perhaps it might be worth, if you're sanding it, it might be worth putting a coat of sand sealer over the top of the milliput. Martin Chapello, what's your favourite preferred finish on a natural edge bowl? Martin, my favourite or my preferred finish on a natural edge bowl is 1 or 2 coats of oil. That's all. Keep it simple. The natural edge bowl, the edge isn't perfect. So if you put a glossy finish on a natural edge piece, to my mind the piece contradicts itself. The imperfection of the natural edge and the perfection of the gloss, it contradicts itself. So I stick with a very, very simple oil finish on a natural edge piece, and then it just, to my mind at least, it just works. Design and make. After asking last week if you had any advice for turning a bowl without a chuck, I decided to give it a go. It came out well. Good. Well done. I'm not a big fan of turning a bowl without a chuck because I find the bottoms of the bowls are really quite thick. It can be done, and if I can, I'll take a peek at your video. No, Leisure, I didn't just get a finger mark on it. Nearly did. Rob Brown, what would be a good lathe for a beginner? Reg, thank you very much. Regina, nice to see you, thank you. Rob Brown, what would be a good all-round lathe for a beginner? That is an incredibly difficult question to answer, Rob. If you've got 500 quid to spare in your budget, I would perhaps look, or £500 to £600, I would perhaps look at a Nova Comet. If you've got £1,000 to £1,500, I would look at one of the Axminster trade lathes. And if you've got £1,500 to £2,500, I would look at perhaps the Nova Galaxy or the Nova Saturn, or this one, the Axminster, big Axminster one, or maybe a Laguna or something like that. It's an incredibly difficult question to answer, and it also depends what you want to do. If you want to turn mostly bowls, then you want to get a bowl with a big swing. A lathe with a big swing, and if you want to turn spindles, then you want a lathe that's got a really long bed. So every lathe is going to be essentially a compromise. Mark, do you ever brush on lacquer? No, Mark, I don't. Nigel Bunker, any plans to stream the metal reactive paints? Yes, I could do actually, Nigel. That's a good idea. It will be another long one like this, certainly 2 evenings, because you've got to put them on, leave them overnight, come back to them the next day. So that's a really good idea, Nigel. I like that. Martin, will you be auctioning the bowl on Thursday? Karen, that's a good idea. I won't be auctioning it on Thursday. It will probably be Saturday, and I like that idea very much. Not sure how we're going to do it yet, but I like that, and I'll be happy to. Because obviously I've got to finish it properly first, just in case I go through the bottom. Phil Bolter, there have been comments this evening about Martin and other turners keeping us sane during the lockdown. Oh, that's very kind, thank you, Phil. Right, ready for another coat, but before we go on to do another coat, we've got 2 coats on here now, and the surface is feeling touch dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Nyweb pad, which it's not a Nyweb pad, sorry, it's a grey Scotch-Brite pad, and I'm just going to knock the surface off the top of the lacquer. So any bits of the lacquer that have gone a little bit bitty, anything that's been raised up a little bit, this will just knock those back just a touch. A little bit of dust there. And I'm doing it like this rather than with the lathe running, because if you do it with the lathe running, there's a danger of getting too much heat into it. And in fact that this has got really quite hard, so I'm going to use a little bit of 400 grit paper, or a little bit of 400 grit Abranet, a little bit of 400 grit Abranet, and then I'm just very, very lightly just going to take the surface off the top. You can see that just beginning to scratch up a little bit, and I'm using barely any pressure at all, because the lacquer here is still, essentially it's wet, but it is touch dry, so it's beginning to harden up, but it is still soft. Now what this isn't doing, it's not taking a coat of wax off, it's essentially keying the surface ready for the next couple of coats. There we go, you can see that that's all scratched up now, and then I'll take a piece of kitchen towel and take off the dust. Don't be tempted to use any kind of solvent to remove the dust at this stage, because the lacquer is not dry. Any solvent that you use is going to absolutely destroy the surface, guaranteed. So give the can another shake, because it's been a few minutes, and then we'll put 2 more coats on, and then that'll be it for the night. So just the same as before. Light, quick coats. That'll do. Oh, sorry. You just saw all of that with the top of my head. I do apologise. There we are. There it is. So that's another coat, and as you can see, that's covered up all of those little scratches that we just made. So that's now got, that lacquer has now got something to key to and stick and bind to. And then we'll let that one go off, and then we'll put 1 more coat on for the night, and then that will be, well, essentially 4 for this evening. And I will do what I said I didn't want to do, particularly just help it dry off just a little bit. You do have to be very careful doing this because you can blister the lacquer, particularly if it's wet and it gets hot very quickly. So if you are going to do it, make sure that you are exceptionally careful. That's a hot air gun, so it might be worth thinking about using perhaps a hairdryer. Gentleton, what about the idea to warm up the surface before spraying a new layer? That's a really good idea, Martin. I hadn't thought of that. Really good idea. You don't want to get it too hot though, remember, because the lacquer underneath is still a little bit on the tacky side. It's not hard yet. When you do warm it up, you will have to be very careful. Chris Sullivan, can you use 00 wire wool, 0000 wire wool? Yes, you can. I generally don't recommend the use of 00 wire wool in the workshop because it can be a fire hazard, and also particularly if you're using it with the lathe running like some people do, when it starts to disintegrate, those tiny little bits of the steel wool can get in the air and maybe get into the bearings of your lathe. Jeff Robinson, do you have tinted lacquer in the UK? I haven't seen tinted lacquer. I'm not sure what we would call it over here, to be honest with you, Jeff. Bam, bam. Bam. You lot are talking about motorbikes. Richard Parker, how long years do the wax finishes last? To give you an idea, Richard, with one of the very first batches of the gloss wax that I made 4 years ago, no, 5 years ago now I think it is nearly, I made my wife a sweetie dish that's used incredibly regularly, and the outside of it is almost as good as when it came off the lathe. So at least 5 years so far, and I'm using that bowl as a guide. We use it, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week, I should think, something like that. Right, just give that a little more going over and then I'll check just to see if that's dried off a bit. It looks like it's dried off a bit, and I'm going to use the back of my finger. I'm going to use the back of my finger to check that it's dry, or touch dry at least, rather than my fingers, because your fingertips might have some grease on them. So that now feels good enough for another going over. So we'll do that now. Give it a shake. Design and make. What made you start Hampshire Sheen? That's a good question. Design and make. I started Hampshire Sheen because I was disappointed with the finishes I was using. I found that I mean, I love a wax finish. Who doesn't love a wax finish? Quite a few people, but never mind. I was disappointed with the wax finishes I was using, and they were going dull in a really short space of time. So I thought, I wonder if I can make one that doesn't. So I did, and that's how Hampshire Sheen was started. It's a slightly longer story than that, but in a nutshell, I didn't like the finishes I was using because they were going dull, and I set out to do better. Right, last coat on for tonight, I think. just the same as before. Start the spray off the piece. There we go. Ta-da! And now you can see that it's beginning to build up. You can see it beginning to build up here. And what you'll find is where you've got a really smooth surface, the lacquers don't sit smoothly over the surface. They tend to orange peel, I guess, with their sort of their surface tension. So they kind of orange peel effect, which is why a proper lacquer finish takes so long, because you've got so much more work to do with it in order to get it nice and properly smooth. Lauren Becker, do you feel the products should be stored in a warmer environment compared to a cool workshop environment? Lauren, no, I don't think so. All of my stuff sits on the shelves here all winter. The only heating I have in here are up to 3 radiators and perhaps a gas heater, you know, one of those little jet engine things, and they sit on the shelves quite happily month in, month out over the winter, and I don't find there's a problem with them at all. Thank you, Design and Make. Reg, I'm officially on. Oh, I'm lost as well. Maybe 4, maybe 6. Can't remember. Quite a few. 2. I think it's 4. Has anybody been counting? 4 coats. Thank you very much. Is that the Tiny Turner here? Hi Emma, how are you? Nice to see you, Emma. I hope you're well. Real Ale 999. Do the embellishing waxes eventually dry out on the wood and lose the effect? No, they'll remain the same colour, because they are, when you buff it up and stuff, it actually dries them out, so they will sit there at that colour ad infinitum. Rob CP, you've just designed a t-shirt and send it to me via Facebook. Okay, cool. Bye bye Chris Sullivan, I've probably missed you, but bye bye anyway. Right, let's give this a little dry off again. Again, I'm being very careful not to get it too hot, because I don't want it to blister. And I'm keeping the hot air gun moving. As I said, a hairdryer will probably be better, because it's not quite such a high temperature. Oop. It's not dry yet. It's a little bit tacky still at the top. So Gary Jones, Martin, do you spray up and down or front to back, back to front on the piece? Gary, I do it all over, because if you have a look here, if I do it like this, if I go from the outside here, we've got a wide spray pattern. And if I turn it round to here, that wide spray pattern is going to catch that bit again. So round the inside, because it's narrower here than it is round the outside, obviously, you tend to get a build up round here, and obviously we don't want it. We want it evenly applied. So I do it kind of in all sorts of different directions. On each coat, just to try and keep it as even as possible. Paul Straker, the colour board behind you looks like a good idea. Oh, this. I made this about 2 days after I finished designing or working out the intrinsic colour collection. It's just a piece of sycamore. It's a sycamore house name board, actually, with the colours applied to bare wood, sanded down to 400, colours on bare wood, 1 coat of oil, and then just a light wax coating over the top. JJ, bye bye, thank you for joining in, see you Thursday. Brent Beecroft, will you denib before adding the next 2 coats? Looking at it, yes I will, Brent. Probably not tonight. I will probably do it tomorrow and do 2 coats tomorrow, and then that will be it until Thursday. Designer Mate, do you sell Hampshire Sheen stickers or YouTube stickers? I don't sell Design and Make. I don't sell the Hampshire Sheen stickers. I send Hampshire Sheen stickers out with every order through the shop, and my own stickers. Hang on, I think I've got some over here. Yeah. My own M. Sabin Smith wood turning stickers I give away at demonstrations and stuff like that. But if you order one of the brand spanking new the Wood Turners Funnel Club stickers off the website, they're free. All you've got to do is pay for postage. You do also get a couple of other stickers thrown in as well. If you have a look down there, look, Wood Turners Funnel Club. Bye bye James Cassidy, thank you very much. We're nearly finished here. Let's just see if that's dry. Go carefully round there. Yeah, tell you what, Brent Beecroft, if you're still here, I'm going to denib that carefully now, and then we'll do 2 more coats tonight, which will be 6 coats, and then we'll do a couple more coats on Thursday. Where was I? Yeah, sorry. I'll denib it now. Put a couple more coats on now, and then Thursday we'll do a couple more coats. Phil will do his blood bikes quiz, and then we'll finish everything off on Saturday. So just the same as before. This has only just gone touch dry, so we've got to incredibly lightly key the surface with the 400 grit Abranet, because the last thing we want to have happen is to wrinkle this or crinkle it or scratch it too much. Now, to be fair, I would leave this longer under normal circumstances, but of course this isn't really normal circumstances, is it? And I am being incredibly careful because I don't want to turn this into a rescue piece. I'd quite like to get it right first time. Right, so there we go. That's the that's that. We could do a little bit more down the bottom here actually. Very, very carefully, because it is a little bit thicker on the bottom than round anywhere else. There we are. Right. One last coat for tonight, and then we'll do a Q&A. Yes, yeah, I will be home before 11, Paul, I promise. But I love what I do, this is my passion, So, I'm gonna share that with you. I will stay up till whatever time, but I do need to be home before 11, or at least before midnight. I might turn into a pumpkin. So here we go. We'll put another coat on. Now I still need to be careful not to put too much on, because I need to let the whole lot dry overnight. There you go. Did you see that last little flurry there? Just like that. I'm not putting another one on. That's going to be it. I'm going to let that dry off. For tonight. Right. Leisure, what's this about Woodworld of Texas having pins? Leisure, the Americans call our badges pins. So Craig at Woodworld of Texas has got badges, which you already have all of them anyway. Silk, thank you very much. I'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday as well. I'm catching these comments. You're typing these comments, and I'm seeing them a few seconds later, or whichever way round it is, and everything's getting all mixed up. But no, Woodworld of Texas has badges. Martin Miles, the demo on Thursday will start at 7:30. We'll put a couple more coats of lacquer on, and then probably by 8:15. We'll be ready to hand over to Phil Bolter for the Blood Bikes wood toning charity quiz. Matt Held, you got a patch too? No, these are patches. Ivor Longwalk, thank you very much. Matt Held, these are patches, but I haven't got any badges. Hang on, yes I have. Hang on. I've just remembered I found one early when I was having a tidy up. On a retro Hampshire Sheen baseball cap. There you go. On a retro Hampshire Sheen baseball cap. That's a badge. Oop. That's a badge there. That's got a little pin that runs through it, runs through the back. So yeah, that's a badge, Matt. These are patches. Alison, thank you very much indeed. I'm glad I help you relax. Thank you for watching. Colin Ball, why don't you invert the can to clear the nozzle? Because I haven't done it yet. And thank you for reminding me as well. I don't normally worry about it too much. I don't find that it makes too much difference, particularly with those nozzles. Andy Harris, how long does it take for the lacquer to fully cure? Overnight before you can start polishing it properly, Andy. But I would leave it at least a good 48 to 72 hours just to let it properly harden off. Renee, with your next order I'll sort you out with some stickers. Darren, thank you very much indeed. Nice to see you. Right, who has any questions? Anybody got any questions at all? Stop touching it. Have you ever gone and you've put lacquer on and you just go, I wonder if it's dry, and then you go, oh, that's almost what I did then. Leave it alone. Night Silk. Paul Kavanagh, can we use the Funnel Club stickers in the bottom of a bowl? You could, yes, if you wanted to. Lauren Becker, would leaving the lathe run help speed up the drying process? I would think it probably will do, Lauren, yes. But there is a small chance that with the lacquer on the surface, with the lathe running, it might start, the lacquer might start to travel as well. Thank you, Jack. Design and make, what would the effect be like if I was to apply 5 to 6 coats of satin lacquer? Would it make a hard coating or not? Yeah, it would do. It would make a hard coating. It's just that the surface would be would have a satin effect to it rather than a glossy one. Mark Wallington, yes. Adrian, will you protect it from dust overnight, or doesn't it need it? Adrian, I could if I wanted to, but because there's more coat, it needs to be denibbed and more coats on tomorrow. There's no point, because when it gets denibbed, any surface dust that falls on it's going to get denibbed off anyway, and actually it's touch dry now anyway. Richard Parker, how do you decide what finishes to use on a piece? Richard, that is a great question. Every piece needs to have its finish considered. If it's a coloured piece like this, 9 times out of 10 I will go for a shiny finish like that. Not necessarily a lacquer, perhaps a wax or something like that. I only really use waxes or lacquers for shiny finishes. But if it's a natural edge piece, like I was explaining to somebody earlier on, if it's a natural edge piece, I believe it needs to be kept simple, because a shiny natural edge piece, I think, tends to contradict itself, because you've got essentially an imperfect edge where we've got the bark and everything and it's all rough. And then if you put a super smooth shiny finish over the surface of it, the piece contradicts itself. It's got a perfect finish but an imperfect edge. It doesn't quite work. So I look at the piece and apply what I think would be the most beneficial finish to it. So shiny for coloured stuff, oil for oil or food safe wax for bowls and salad bowls, fruit bowls, that kind of thing. And if it's a natural edge piece, I'll keep it super simple with just 1 or 2 coats of oil. Leisure, do you always denib after every 2 coats? Pretty much. Sometimes I don't. You know, so long as you're denibbed a couple of times, I don't think that it needs much effort. I don't think it needs I don't think it needs to be denibbed really after every 2 coats. You could probably do it after every 3 if you needed to. If they're thin enough coats, of course. Ivor Longwalk, if you do fingerprint it, how do you get around that? Let it dry, either denib it off, sand it off, or rub over the top of it, put another coat on, let it dry, sand that back a little bit, another coat, sand that back, and such and such. RKL Woods, how did you come into contact with wood turning? That's a good question, RKL Woods. In a previous life, well, in a previous occupation, I was a photographer and graphic designer, so I was working in a creative environment, and I had a studio in the town near here called Alton. I had a photographic studio and graphic design studio, and unfortunately I lost that business and the studio when I got divorced. And then I spent a bit of time messing around and not doing an awful lot, and I ended up working for my cousin, and at the time she was running a mobile bar company, so we would travel around to all these county shows and these agricultural shows and what have you, and weddings and all sorts of stuff with a bar, and get people hopelessly drunk which was great fun. And then we were doing a big show at the Bath and West County Show, which is I don't know, about 70 odd, 80 odd miles away from where we are here. And there was a guy called Martin Symes working on a lathe behind our marquee. And I asked him one day if I could have a go. And he said, no, but bring me over a couple of pints of cider and I'll let you have a go in the morning before the gates open. And that's how I started. I literally had it. He helped me turn a gardener's dibber, or if you're in America, you call it a dibble. Over here we call it a dibber. He helped me turn one of those, and that was it. I was hooked. And that was 5 years ago. 6 years ago. 6 years ago this month. Michael Cowison, yeah, reverse sanding one-way chucks have a grub screw. Not all chucks have a grub screw, which is why I pulled the tailstock up to sand that bowl in reverse. That's a very good point there, Michael. Boop, boop, boop. You know, I think that might be ready for another coat. Yeah, if I put one more coat on now, I mean, you don't have to hang around for it. I'll put one more coat on now, and then that'll be 6 tonight. I'll put one more coat on. There we are. Don't put too much on, otherwise it will start to run. Now, a good idea is to invert the can and clear the nozzle out if you're going to leave it for any length of time. Rob CP, I never knew I was a graphic designer. Yeah, or in fact anything to do with my own wood turning website and stuff, and Hampshire Sheen, all of the designs, they're all my own. Martin Miles, what made you choose to colour your work? Martin, I live a colourful life. I'm a fairly buoyant character, and I don't like wood to look. You know, I like to accentuate what's there by applying colour to it, and you know, you can see here there's a whole load of detail that the colours that we've applied have brought out that just simply wouldn't be as visible as they are now had we not added the colour to it. You know, you can still see that it's wood, you can still see the grain and everything else like that in it, and I just really enjoy it. I just really enjoy adding colour, and I will colour anything. I genuinely, seriously believe that you can add even just a little bit of colour or a little bit of texture to every piece that will just help it stand out from another one, either on a competition table or at a craft market or something like that. I always look for that little bit of attention to detail that will help my work stand out from everybody else's, and if it happens to be a crazy-ish colour scheme like this or something else, then so be it. You know, I don't really like turning round and brown. You're very welcome, Rick. Thank you very much. Right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do 15 minutes more Q&A. I will not put another coat of lacquer on here. There is enough on there tonight to dry off overnight. So I'm going to do 15 more minutes and then I'm going to go home. Honest. Thank you, David. Bye, Colin. Thank you very much. Rubber Dubwood, if you ever colour you, I'm unsubscribing. I have actually coloured you and it looked really good. But I didn't put it in a video. Martin, is your bowl gouge a Hope one? No, it's not Bespoke Creations. It's I use a combination actually. I use a mixture of Sorby Excelsior and Axminster. Stephen Rickett, you've got loads of cherry, so hoping colours work well. Yes, make sure that you sand it properly, Stephen, and use complementary colours. I wouldn't to be what am I trying to say? I wouldn't put something like a blue on a cherry, on a cherry bowl, or maybe a green. I wouldn't do that. I would stick to complementary colours. Stuart, you don't think you could bring yourself to colour walnut? I have. Walnut looks amazing with the ruby colour on it. It looks so rich and sumptuous. It's gorgeous. Try it. If you don't like it, cut it off and start again. Paul, have you ever tried teaching my lovely wife how to turn a bowl? No, Paul, she has done a little bit of turning, but she's not really that interested in it. I can ask her again if she wants to have a go. But I'm not sure how interested she is, to be fair. Night, Colin. Darren Spurgeon, 15 minutes earlier than last time. Yeah, I know, but I love you all. You know, I like answering your questions and hanging out with you. It's not like I get to hang out anywhere else at the moment. Pat Harris, hiya, thank you very much. David Hall, did you have any lessons or did you teach yourself? David, I am 99.9999% self-taught. I went down to see Les Thorne, who lives and his workshop's a few miles away. And when I started getting into teaching and stuff, I went down to see him, and he had a quick look over my technique and gave me a little couple of tweaks here and there and sent me on my way. And I see Les quite regularly now. He's a good friend of mine. But yeah, I'm self-taught, yeah. Night, Ted. Design and make. Another journey question. What made you start YouTube? Well, I wanted to give back to the community that had helped me get started in the first place. I watched, it must have been hundreds and hundreds of hours of Mike Walt, Carl Jacobson, Tim Yoder, and a couple of others to get started. And I wanted to give something back to that community, to sort of say thank you and to help and encourage other people to take it up, have a go, you know, all of those wonderful things. And it just turned in. Well, I always wanted, from when I'm blah blah blah. I always wanted, when I start decide. I am so tired. When I decided to take up wood turning, when I did that gardener's dibber, in that 20 minutes, I said, I'm going to be a wood turner. So that's what I did. It was always going to be some kind of business in one form or another. So by giving back to the community that had taught me, and then starting the series of Turner's Journey from essentially rookie to professional, it has just purely charted the business as it has grown, changed and developed and supported by you guys, and I still find myself on YouTube giving back to the community, perhaps not for teaching me now, but for supporting me and the businesses. Darren, do you watch any other wood turners on YouTube? Oh, Darren, I'd love to. I watch Mike occasionally, Carl Jacobson, Tim Yoder is an absolute must. There are a few others as well, but I get so little time to actually sit down and watch anything. With everything else that's going on, I get very, very little time. And the spare time that I do have, I obviously spend it with my wife and stepson and my kids, when I haven't seen my kids properly since end of February. So it's very difficult to find time to watch as many videos as I would like to. Rob, is there no risk of the bowl cracking? I'm guessing there won't be any movement because the wood is dry. Rob, I'd be very surprised if there's any movement, and it certainly won't crack. Bye, Chris Cox. Thank you very much. Georgianne Burdett, is turning how you make your living? That's a very good question, Georgianne. The majority of my living comes from sales of the Hampshire Sheen products, which are for wood turners, and the rest of it comes from demonstrating wood turning and teaching wood turning. It's not quite a 50-50 split, but the wood turning industry, yes, that is where my living comes from, yes. But from actually wood turning and selling items that I've made, no. Design and Make, thank you, you're very welcome. Marky, any thought of another pantomime-esque video? Maybe, we'll see. Thank you, Stephen Rickett. Lauren Becker, you're very welcome. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm off to feed the hedgehogs. Oh, Ivor, I love hedgehogs. I'd love to have some hedgehogs in our garden. There's a fairly local hedgehog rescue place that puts hedgehogs back into the wild near where we live, but we're not allowed to have any hedgehogs in our garden, even though we've got, we live out in the countryside, because we've got a dog, Digby. We're not allowed hedgehogs because of Digby. Right, 5 minutes and then we're going to go. Ask me anything you like, so long as it's not too personal. Philip, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate that. Don't forget, Thursday's demonstration is a couple more coats of lacquer on here. We'll look at denibbing a little bit more, a couple more coats, and then I'm going to be handing over to Phil Bolter, who is your administrator, and he also works for me here at Hampshire Sheen, and he will be doing a charity quiz for the blood bikes here in the UK. And all of the super chat money for Thursday will go to the blood bikes because they do such an amazing job. Rubber Dubwood, do you think it's possible to make a living purely from selling turned items, or do you need other wood turning related revenue streams to supplement it? Rubber Dubwood, that is an absolutely superb question. Top marks for probably the best question of the night, I'd say. I would say, let me sit down. I need to rest my aching legs, or rest my aching feet. Right, I would say yes, you can make a living purely from wood turning, but you would probably need to look at production turning, stair spindles, newel posts, all of those kinds of things, in order to start making a decent or a reasonable living from wood turning with arty stuff on the side. It's very, very difficult thanks to places like IKEA and cheap bowls, basically, and people having a buy it cheap mentality. You've got to find the right marketplace in order to sell stuff like this. Frankly, if I was to put this up for sale, I would be looking for over £150 for it. For a maple bowl, and it will be beautifully sanded, it will be beautifully finished, etc., etc. So you need to find the right marketplace in which to sell. If you live in a touristy area, fantastic. Have a look at gift shops, tourist gift shops, places of interest, that kind of thing, particularly if you're using local woods to you. Like I could be using Hampshire oak or Hampshire ash, something like that. We've got a steam heritage railway that runs near here. I could probably get into their gift shop with local stuff. There are ways that you can do it, but it takes time. Stuart Ingriel, I'll come on to your question in just a second. It takes time to find an audience and a marketplace and actually start selling into it. But yes, you can. It's not impossible. Stuart, is the Black Dog Workshop still a thing? Stuart, it is and it isn't. It is as in the physical space. The premise behind the Black Dog Workshop I've actually left behind because basically of bureaucracy and red tape and being let down, I suppose you could say it. I set the Black Dog Workshop up with the primary aim of helping people with mental health issues alleviate those symptoms by getting into wood turning and learning about wood turning, and it can alleviate some symptoms of that. So it all got set up, and I was talking to various charities and organisations. I'm not going to name names, but I was talking to at least 5 or 6 different charities, government agencies, and other agencies like that. And one particular agency came back and said, no, or rather, yes, we are really, really, really interested in having our people come to see you, but you have to make it available to all of them for free, not just those with mental health issues. And everybody else never ever got back to me, and I tried for 6 to 9 months trying to get hold of the right people to talk to and everything else like that, and in the end I was running out of money, and I needed to concentrate on building Hampshire Sheen up so I could earn a wage, or at least start to earn some money. So in essence, Stuart, the Black Dog Workshop as a premise and as an idea was let down by the people who I was trying to help. It's a shame, but I still, it's still here. I still teach, and a few people who do come here do talk to me about any mental health problems, and they've heard that wood turning helps. So it's just not working in the same way that I'd hoped. Joel Smith, you see, I always use a faceplate when turning bowls. Is there a reason you don't use a worm screw? I used to use a worm screw all the time, Joel, and I kind of get into it every now and then with a worm screw. Oh, I'll use a worm screw this time. And although they're nice and safe and they're nice and secure, I find a faceplate is, for me, it's just better. Stuart, it is a shame. It is a shame, and yeah. Georgianne, thank you. Alan Sharp, what sharpening jig would you recommend? This one. The Sorby Pro Edge, Alan. That's what I recommend. I absolutely love it. It does everything I want it to do quickly and easily. Charles Knight, are you an early riser or do you lay in? Charles, I don't like to waste my time, shall we say that. It doesn't matter what time I haul my sorry backside out of bed, I will always make the most of my time, so I try and be productive from when I start work at about 8:30 in the morning until when I finish work. At the moment it's anywhere between 1:30 and 2:30 the following morning, because there's just so much to do. Martin, Martin Chapello, wood turning is a therapy. You've had some positive talks. Fantastic, well done. I'm really pleased that that's happening for you, Martin. Richard Parker, do you use shellac as a final finish, or would you put a wax over the top? Richard, in Indiana, USA, I'm not keen on shellac as a final finish. I love it as a sanding sealer, but I would always put a final finish over the top of shellac. Alicat, do you make any money from your YouTube videos? It's not a living, Alicat, that's for sure. I've got, I think it's 238 videos on my YouTube channel at the moment, and although they do bring in some money, it is nowhere near a wage. Darren, you're too kind. Thank you. Design and make. I'm off as well now. I have overshot my 5 minutes by 3 minutes. No, I really could spend all night chatting to you guys, particularly as the British ones go to bed, and I'm left with company from the US. I'll be very happy to chat to all of you. But one thing I will say though is I am planning on heading over to the AAW symposium at Omaha, Nebraska next July, I think it is, July 2021. I'm planning on it. So Nebraska 2021, I should be there. Frederick, you're welcome. Thank you. Shall we put one more coat on? No, we won't put one more coat on. David Goodwin, your uncle got into wood turning after suffering a brain injury. Brilliant, David. I hope it's going well for your uncle. Right, yeah. That's got to be it. Big thank you to everybody who has joined in this evening. I hope to see you on Thursday. Remember, Phil's doing his quiz after a couple more coats of lacquer going on here, and all of the super chats from Thursday night will be going straight to the blood bikes. If you've got any questions, queries or comments, please do drop me a line. Facebook is the best place to get hold of me at the moment, because I have over 800 emails in my inbox that need looking at. If you haven't subscribed already, there's a little button just down here, so click that button and give the little bell a ding as well, so you'll get a notification whenever I go online. And I think that's probably about it for tonight. So thank you very much indeed for joining me, and I will look forward to seeing you from 7 PM on Thursday night. Cheers guys, bye for now.